What's going on, boys? Thanks to our patrons and our Fiverr customers, arm yourselves, life stuff. And actually, while we're here, we're going to start with a brand new sigil. Thematically appropriate this time around. And we'll go through these magical words just once. No repetitions this time. Uyur misint hima, ravet eilig. Gre ark dren valent. This will be in the description for anyone who wants it. Remember those numbers. 434, 11, 6, 7, 31, and 62. Now, let's talk a bit about Vampire from a newcomer's perspective. And when it comes to mechanics, we're going to be talking primarily about V5, because this is the one I want to use. In my experience, when you want to learn something, especially if you already know you want to go in your own direction, you need to learn the most up-to-date, this is how it works, dogma, not just the rules, down into the nitty-gritty. Then you can go off in your own direction if you want to. You need to learn the rules before you can break them, and there is almost always stuff worth knowing in dogma. Even if you don't agree with it, or especially if you don't agree with it. Now, my first exposure to Vampire was Bloodlines years ago. And after Bloodlines, I learned a bit about the lore, if not the meta-narrative. In fact, for years now, we've been calling a certain type of S&M Camarilla S&M. Because when you look at people who are into S&M, and aren't born with that dog in them, or without the nerve to explore that dog for themselves, they get involved in these weird, feudalistic, ritualistic societies with a lot of nasty undertones. Right, the first time I learned about this stuff, I thought it was just odd. Odder still that when you speak with formally trained S&M dudes, all of them insist that they are not gay, which I thought was coming from just the concept of a bunch of dudes coming together and teaching each other how to sleep with women, which does sound a little gay, parentheses derogatory. But then you find out many of these dudes got into this stuff when they were teenagers, and many of these S&M circles, particularly the ones aimed at dudes, are run by older homosexual cruising type dudes. So odds are good they got sexually assaulted, or they were aware of that going on. And there are a lot of parallels here, in my mind, between Camarilla, or the Camarilla, and the way these S&M groups operate. Tangent, but I've been saying Camarilla S&M for a long time, and this was a good opportunity to explain what I'm talking about. And I think that tangent is a good place to start, because in my research into Vampire Tabletop, from the community, I was getting a lot of those vibes. And one of our commenters was gracious enough to provide context for what it's like to be in the vampire community. And although this commenter didn't say that, again, based on what this commenter said, based on what the community looks like and acts like, and frankly, based on where or what might have inspired Vampire aside from vampires, I got a bad feeling about this community, which is why we're not going to get involved. Typology is one thing. Typologists are annoying, they're creepy, but typologists on every level of community are not like the vibes I'm getting from Vampire. And I don't know what to make of that, because even in this current edition, the game, the mechanics, seem like the perfect tools for examining the uglier parts of yourself and of your species from a safe distance, which is sort of what typology at a higher level does. The system serves as bulletproof observation glass through which you can dissect or view a dissection of something terrible. And in this way, the book itself comes across as a bit schizophrenic, or maybe bipolar. It's like a dog that wants to hump your leg, but is afraid of you, so it's just hunched over, thrusting, and staring you dead in the eye without touching you. And that's not even an exaggeration, because the game mechanically pushes you into doing or discussing or witnessing terrible things while shaming you and warning you against it. For example, let's talk game mechanics. Let's say you are playing a traditional old Cabela's ass hunting game, and it spends a lot of time explaining different calibers of bullets to you. What they are, maybe a little bit of history around them, what they're good for, and then, although it doesn't need to because it's a video game, it also explains to you at length firearm safety and the philosophy of hunting. As in, it's not about trophies, it's not about killing something for fun, at least if you're doing it right. It is about harvesting meat in a sporting but reasonable manner and connecting oneself with one's environment. None of which you would need to know for a video game. So without actually looking at the game, just looking at these mechanics in the manual that they don't print anymore, what do you think you're going to be doing? That's right, sleeping with your sister, but also getting into a technical and a spiritual place using firearms. And you can determine that based on the mechanics you are presented in the manual, in addition to the stuff you don't need to know, especially the stuff you don't need to know because it speaks to the philosophy or the headspace the game creators are trying to get you into. Now let's try this again, but with a different game. At level 10, you can have sex normally. At level 5, you can have sex, but you have to fake it. At level 2, you can't have sex at all because you're stinky and deranged, just like in real life. However, you have a special ability that will allow you to have sex. But what if somebody does not want to have sex with you? Well, you can roll to lie to them or gaslight them to get them to do what you want. You can roll to overpower them, and you can actually specialize in that. You can cast magic on them to make them do whatever you want. You can get them addicted to drugs and make them rely on you for a fix. And you can also play as a clan that specializes in this sort of thing. Now, what do you think is an uncomfortably large part of this game? Well, if you've had any of these sorts of experiences, or, you just have common sense and get a disgusting vibe from the community that plays the game and the people that wrote the game, you're right, and it's right in front of your face, and even though it's not explicit at first, if you go digging, it is not hard to find. But the game shames you for drawing conclusions the game's mechanics have made it impossible not to draw. And there are many instances of this, but I use this one because it's the oddest. There is an undeniable sexual element to vampires. However, you've built a game that deals with that mechanically in a deeply uncomfortable way, while telling people not to do any of the things you have put in front of them, while attracting a community that has a really rapey vibe. And this sort of self-contempt comes out in a bunch of different areas. Because while I have no experience with older editions or V20, V5 seems fixated on wanting there to be clearer good guys and bad guys. Morally upright actions and morally damnable actions. But they've removed none of the damnable stuff, and from what I've read, they've made it more intense. Catholic priests. The good old Irish. That's the vibe I get from Vampire. And in this game's context, putting evil stuff in is not off-putting to me. That's the draw. You are a cursed being, which we'll get into, in a world of awful people, awful actions, and an inevitable and terrible coming conclusion. You are coming to this game to explore horrible things safely. How much is goodness worth to you? How much are you prepared to lose trying to be a good person? When you're a bad person, you're good at bad things, you're around bad people, and how are you going to feel when something bad happens? Either something bad happens and you find out about it, or you're forced to do something bad, or you choose to do something bad. How do you feel? What does this reveal about you? What does this help you understand about the real world? A piece of fiction is so much truer than any fact could be. And again, the game is designed, if not for you to be engaging in, then for you to be needing to deal with really horrible things. You thought the sexual assault stuff was bad. That's not even the worst. That is somehow not even the worst. And they put this shit in while condemning and refusing to acknowledge their own part in it. And I think that's probably, in large part, why the community sets off so many alarm bells, for me anyway. These are mechanically sick humans in the IRL game who narratively, socially, are hiding that evil, often by condemning it. It's like an actual masquerade. So enough talking about the people. What is drawing us into Vampire? Well, on the most basic level, we mentioned it already, the capacity for self-examination, especially the bad stuff. And self-exploration, that commenter confirmed, is one of the common draws. Despite the coddling in writing the writers do, the mechanics they've put together are designed to put you in bad situations. And not just making you fail a challenge numerically, but making you confront really ugly things. Themes of powerlessness, inability to control oneself, taking actions either in pleasure or in necessity, and then facing the consequences of those actions. Perfect example. My first experimental solo character. The combat mechanics are pretty hard to understand, so I designed a combat-focused character so I would be forced to learn the combat system. My character was really strong, really good at fist fighting, really good at scaring people. Ergo, I solved all of this character's problems using violence and intimidation. Being a nasty bully. At first, for pleasure. Remember what we were talking about 2 videos ago. And I listened to Andrew Yang's audiobook because I was curious. Interesting. But one of the things he said, or he mentioned, were these studies in which it was proven the more power or resources a person has access to, the less empathy they have. And even when they're made aware of it and asked to be empathetic in these little challenges, they struggle with it, even when they're trying to do it. Just having power makes you less able or willing, even if you want to empathize. Now, I would guess that lack of empathy comes about necessarily, as in, if you have power and resources and you empathize with everyone, then you won't be keeping those resources or powers very long. But it speaks to the way I was running this character. I had the power physically over most people, and I exercised it, and I enjoyed it. But then it became less enjoyable, because people in kind started getting a little more threatening, a little more dangerous. And then it became, I'm fighting because I have no other options. I am unequipped to do anything except fight, and all my fighting has led to nothing but more fights. Until dude finally ran into that guy. That motherfucker. And it was hilarious and telling, spiritually, that my character did not want to fight this dude. By this point, he was so run down and tired of fighting and scared, he just wanted to get away, but his fists wrote a check that his glass jaw could not cash, and he got splattered. And that was the end. Doesn't it suck when someone larger than you picks on you for picking on people smaller than you? There's a lesson in that. Just because you can do something doesn't mean you should, and maybe more importantly, just because you think you can't stop doesn't mean you shouldn't try. Or maybe again thematically, devil's advocate. Vanity, my favorite sin. Maybe it's your time to lose. If this character I was playing just lost a fight, or just took the pride hit and walked away when someone tried to intimidate him one too many times, his brains wouldn't be splattered across the floor of a bowling alley. That is what is drawing me to this game, that makes me want to learn it. And not just to learn it, but to go with it despite the vibe I get from the writers. I don't have to engage in the community, but if we're going to learn how to do this correctly, we have to deal with the core rulebook. And again, I don't want this to come off as if I am condemning the writers for having awful shit in their games. I'm not. That's the draw. Dealing with the worst parts of the human soul and looking at them from a safe distance. It doesn't have the same effect if you tone it down and neuter the ugliness or the severity, right? Another vibe I'm getting is old vampire was transgressive and edgy in one way. Current vampire is transgressive and edgy in another way. They are both morally reprehensible, but they are wearing different masks now, or they are acting themselves out in a different way now. And I am actually going with V5's version of transgressive and edgy, the one that explicitly hates people like me, and I'm extracting a surprising amount of joy and value out of it. Example, Thin Bloods. They are written and presented with another certain vibe. You remember Typhoon from that Parks and Rec clip? Or that Onion video that described the way male and transgender prostitution rates skyrocket wherever the RNC is held. The actors, the male prostitute actors in that video, remember them? When I'm reading Thin Bloods, I get this... It's like remember South Park, actually, we're referencing a lot of pop culture about the sucking your dick plays. I'm getting this feeling that this writer is trying to communicate something to me about the way he views Thin Bloods. And by extension, homosexual men. Are Thin Bloods a thinly veiled allegory for homosexual men? And if they are, why are they written and presented as so lispy and heavy? Is that what gay men are to you? And it's an explicitly gay male vibe I am getting from Thin Bloods. And not gay male generally, but a certain sort of writer's idea of homosexual men. And I was going to avoid Thin Bloods entirely at first, because that's irritating, but I decided to go with it, give one a try, and lean into what this writer seems to want, and I was surprised. I made a male La Sombra light Thin Blood. And he's a bit of a booty warrior, if I can use that term. Specifically targeting real tough guys. And I'm in the middle of using this character, but the narrative that is emerging focuses on the extreme guilt and acceleration associated with whirlpools of violence, as opposed to cycles of violence, because a cycle, that sounds like it can go on forever, whereas a whirlpool, you're going straight into one spot. In his case, either losing his mind from hatred and guilt, or, we said earlier, just because you can doesn't mean you should. More importantly, just because you think you can't doesn't mean you shouldn't try. Trying to find some kind of way out of this whirlpool he's gotten himself into. And I got here by leaning into the mechanics and the writer's writing, even though initially I didn't agree with it, and it is still kind of... At first it was irritating, and I guarantee if I ever have to reread the entire rulebook again, I'm going to be irritated again. But now it's just kind of funny. Like, one of the things this character is trying to do is synthesize the highest quality poppers in existence, because that seems like something the writer would want a homosexual male thin blood to do. I am enjoying this. And I'm enjoying it not in spite of the awfulness of the things in Vampire, and probably the awfulness of the creators, the awfulness of the community, but because of them. Because when is the shadow, your shadow, or in vampire terms, the beast, you have an actual shadow mechanic, and they do reference Jung in the rulebook, you motherfuckers, I see you. When is the beast most powerful? When you are unaware of it, repressing it, trying to deny it, and seeing it in others and attacking them for it. That's what this book is, that's what this community is. Extremely repressed shadows acting themselves out in the worst ways, I'm sure in real life, but also in these mechanics. And in these moments I am reminded of a sentiment from one of Ryan Gosling's best films. You cannot defeat your enemy by fighting them, because fighting them only makes them stronger, makes them more compelled to fight you, makes them more durable, makes them more hateful, matching or exceeding your hatred. And this all seems like a thing we've been thinking about a lot recently, but what is literally me's answer? You don't fight them, you don't destroy them, you don't hate them. You embrace them and you love them. Now, is that ever what we are actually going to do in real life? No, because that gets you killed. That sentiment would work if humanity were between just 5 and 10% less awful, but we aren't. Nonetheless, it is a pretty sentiment. So the community is disgusting, the writers are disgusting, the book is disgusting and bipolar. It's disgusting in two ways, pitted against each other. But as a tool, right now, actually, we might be in a golden age, Vampire seems like it could be peaking in serving its function if examining the shadow of yourself and of the world is what you want out of the game. And everything is thematic, everything is poetry. I'm gonna gush for a minute. So people are acting like Vampire 5 is the end times. It's the worst. And in the meta-narrative, it is either the end times or closing in on the end times. Most notably by the appearance of, or omenized by, Thin Bloods. Not exactly vampires, not exactly humans, and it seems like a lot of people don't play them because they're odd. Or if you're going to include Thin Bloods, it should be focused only on Thin Bloods. But I realized something thematic about Thin Bloods. So, vampires, full-blooded vampires, are not human. They are engineered to prey on humanity. And I have such mixed feelings about this book, and I love it. Vampires don't need to breathe. Blood does not run or pump through their veins. A vampire's body is a dead cup designed to contain the blood that matters. This semi-sentient thing, or maybe fully sentient thing, that is the vampire's not soul and its shadow. And it's such a small thing that vampires don't pump blood, they can't eat food. Vampires are categorically, unsettlingly not human. They aren't people with fangs and powers, they are totally different entities. Terrible entities. Again, designed to prey on humanity. But as I mentioned earlier, despite my initial thoughts on Thin Bloods, I'm just not going to play them, they aggravate me. I decided to play one, and as I'm playing this Thin Blood, I am realizing that this thing is dangerous. In fact, it almost feels like Thin Bloods are designed to prey on vampires. Because a Thin Blood can deal with the threats that would kill a vampire very quickly. And while, if as a Thin Blood you go up against a full-blooded vampire, toe-to-toe, equal footing, the full-blooded vampire wins every time, or almost every time. If you choose your fights correctly, a Thin Blood can match a full-blooded vampire flat-footed, while also benefiting from things that would normally kill a full-blooded vampire. So, like a Potence 5 Thin Blood is not fucking around, even if all things were equal. But then you throw in fire, you throw in sunlight. Thin Bloods are vampire predators. Perhaps the ultimate curse of Cain. Vampires get to dick around and be powerful for however long, unbridled power over humans, if not humanity as a whole. But then, inevitably, at some point, you're going to breed the thing that will kill you. Thin Bloods are the end times. I can imagine a world in which, like the first city, or is it the second city? Which city is the one where is it Carthage? I know there are a few attempts vampires and humans tried to live together and it just didn't work. I could very easily imagine a situation in which Thin Bloods align with humanity against vampires, and then vampires die out that way. Right? Because Thin Bloods can't embrace reliably, so they kill off the lower generations and then die out. And then vampirism, or humanity, can go on without vampirism. It's really nifty, and I don't understand people who don't like 5th edition. Well, okay, I do totally understand people who don't like 5th edition. However, if you go with it, there's a lot of mechanical and narrative and even psychological joy you can extract from this. The writers would lynch me if they could, but I think they're doing good work. And another thing I'll link in the description is TerilliumV, some of his videos, if you're interested in learning about the vampire clans and all this. Now, his videos are pretty long, and the first one that goes over the clans, the AI voice, is not perfect, but it's thorough, it's good. Actually, I'll link another channel, maybe I'll link some of his videos, I'm not sure. I'll put a bunch of knowledge flavor stuff in the description if you are curious. And for reference, I mentioned last time there are 2 channels I like, one I really like and one that I think is pretty good, but I'm not super into. TerilliumV is the one I really like. That's cutting edge, futuristic shit, I love it. That's the direction we're moving in, it's grand. And then the other one is Lazar of Stygia. A little stuffy, a little southern, but really good. Now we're going to talk about the homebrew stuff I'm working on. Even though I know I'm forgetting something, and I didn't capture all of my feelings about Vampire at large as a newcomer. I'll probably have to make more videos about this stuff as time goes on. I know I did not capture everything, and I'm hoping I said everything I needed to say for now in the way I needed to say it. Last time we were talking about this Tremere Chantry idea with a lot of diegesis, incentivizing people to learn actual skills. Now, let's scale it back. That is so too much, it's unreal. I think there's a way we can start smaller and then build into something like that if that's what we want to do. But now that I'm a little more versed in Vampire, I think we can still get value out of it, not by using the system to our own ends, but by just engaging in the system as it is. I think there's enough self-examination and fun there that it could be worthwhile on its own. I was just taking a piss and it came to me. Cognitive dissonance. That's what bothers me about the book and Vampire and community at large. Anyone who does something foul and then pretends like they're the good guy bothers me. Be foul or be good, but don't lie. Okay, back to Homebrew. Okay, on screen is my first attempt at my work-in-progress gameflow document. And we've already evolved past this a little bit, but it still holds. And I'm trying to get this gameplay loop down to a science, because while I'm learning, you can't automate everything, unfortunately, unless you're doing an actual video game, but if you're doing that, that's a completely different beast. I want a unified ground base level system. What have I learned working in corporate? Even if you hate rules, and you probably hate them because you've never dealt with anything larger than independent or small groups, rules keep things in order when you get overwhelmed with bullshit. Even bad rules will shield your mind from the enormity of people's problems and their stupidity. And in some cases, bad rules are bad intentionally, as like a thorn, or a set of thorns, thorn bush, to keep... It's all to protect you. If a rule looks intentionally bad, consider that it might have been designed that way. Regardless, what rules do, and especially systems of rules, systems in general, they flow. You have some set of expectations, what you can expect from others, what they can expect from you, and you have it's like a doctrine. When this happens, we do this. Or when this thing reaches this stage, this is what we do. So you don't get overwhelmed. Because you might not need these rules all the time, but you want to have them at least, and to uphold them at best, so when you do need them, you have precedent, and you have power. You don't get overrun. I'm buying a large corkboard, in part so I can buy twine and string and put up pictures of people and put string between them and, theorize about the space demons in NATO, but also so I can track this stuff physically without needing to have multiple files on my computer, even though I do already have a lot of files on my computer related just to this. And this all will be adjusted. For instance, the stakeout period in jobs is completely useless. In fact, I probably should have taken that out already. But I want to start each turn, or I want there to be trackers beyond just hunger. Things you need to engage with the systems in order to maintain, like rent or something. Really getting into the darkest parts of humanity now. But in the system I'm envisioning, everyone starts with their trackers, and everyone knows when we have rolled over into a new turn, like a wipe in Rust. At the beginning, in the beginning of the month, let's say, even though I'm not dead set on that time period, you feed if you need to feed, and you can engage in 1 to 3 opportunities, major opportunities. Opportunities are non-job activities that improve your character in some way. You're probably not going to get XP from it, but you might get money, you might get ingredients for a ritual, you might meet somebody, stuff like that. Progress that is not specific to the way jobs work, that are tracked and progressio. And then you have non-progress roleplay. This stuff that is not necessarily tracked. Players interacting with each other, or players using the characters they have built to go off on their own adventures. Even if this stuff isn't tracked, this might appeal to an atmosphere. Getting to use your progress in a way that allows you to engage with the world differently. And this isn't to say non-progress roleplay doesn't affect anything, because on a soft level it absolutely will. All experiences affect the way you go about doing things, but they could be tracked in a hard way depending, but we won't be planning on that, because I don't know how to structure that. Are players supposed to declare formally with contracts that they hate each other and are going to try to kill each other? Now that would be funny, and I would really love to do that, but if we got that specific, I would lose my mind, even with just a few players. But then we get into the primary progress, which are jobs. These are how you get XP each month or each turn, and sometimes other stuff. Now, I also want to have a system for the world, or the city. I want to have a system for nemesis groups, and I want threats. I want more threats, and I want players who are engaging in these systems to be able to inflict themselves upon the world. But we haven't gotten there yet. For now, let's look at jobs. I've put together an example job. Now, this is what a job on a job board might look like. And this was totally randomized, or put together with totally random elements using a bunch of different oracles. Here you can see this is some Teddy K Archangel bullshit. And we did not plan this, I want to reiterate. We did not plan on eco-terrorism. Just kind of happened. So right now we have 10 complete, but not totally complete, like beta types of jobs. Each type of job has different targets or objectives. We have a separate location oracle that, well, it's not really a location oracle, we're using the storyteller's toolkit for that. We have an oracle for the weather. We have a population or crowd oracle, so you can do a medium-sized crowd or you can get specific with numbers. We put around 20. We have an outdoor challenges oracle, so if you, or what you need to deal with when you are getting close to the target. Indoor challenges for once you're inside. Now we don't, that's the other one, we don't have a traveling oracle. So oracles specific for moving between places, or we need a more fleshed out outdoor oracle. All of our oracles actually need to be more fleshed out. But my hemispheres are drained at the moment. In fact, we're talking about this now, but I've needed to take a break from this because the logistics in trying to make all this work seamlessly was killing me, right? Because you can, I had it set up in a way, and it is kind of still the same way now. If you do enough rolls, my system will spit out a job for you to complete. But they aren't, the challenges and the locations and all these things are not necessarily connected well. Meaning you could, even with one of these amalgam jobs, just roll dice and get the outcome, but, and I'm a numbers go up person, we were talking about types of players. I am a numbers go up person, but jobs like these are not narrative enough to satisfy me, and that's a problem, because I want to play this. And we're constantly trying to automate smoothness, but I'm beginning to think that's going to be almost impossible. Because let's say you do get a perfectly smooth job, and this one is not that bad in terms of smoothness. You understand exactly what you're doing and what you're dealing with. If you want the job to be more than just dice rolls, you need storyteller involvement. You need narrative. I tried playing some of these jobs by just dice rolling each challenge, and not only did it not work very well, but also it wasn't very fun. Whereas, if I took the exact same prompt or job off the job board, and then played through that job narratively, it is night and day in terms of fun. Here's an example of a job played out a little more narratively. The coterie, or the squad, includes Morgan, who is the Lasombrelite Thinblood we were talking about, Madison, who is a human gangster, and Selzer. She is a Tremere with Asperger's. Another character I'm really enjoying because I leaned into what the weirdo writers wanted. And again, I'm going to gush for a second because I'm having so much fun. So the Tremere clan got annihilated or broken up. They were the Pyramid. The Pyramid has been shattered because the writers hate fascists and girls get it done. Even though, in my eyes, when I was first learning about Vampire, the draw to Tremere for me was girls do get it done as long as we are all united and know our place within the Pyramid. It's such an... No, I know exactly why politically they targeted the Tremere, but twisting the knife with the women angle showed their hand a little too hard. Because again, maybe I'm misunderstanding, but really one of the draws of Clan Tremere was the fact that it's egalitarianly fascist. As long as you serve your superior faithfully and lead your subordinates faithfully, everything is good. Anyone can do anything. Maybe I'm misunderstanding, but that concept of these fascist blood mages I quite enjoyed, because it makes everything... We all have utopias we wouldn't mind living in. I would love to live in a continentalist, New World Order authoritarian state, if it worked the way it was supposed to work. I.e., every color and creed gets along as long as we're from the New World, and we dunk on the Old World. However, instead of being a piss baby about my beloved fascists getting shattered for stupid reasons, play into it. So Selzer, the neurodivergent woman, is so invested in occult study, she learns about vampires and the masquerade, and she knows she wants to be a Tremere. She knows who Tremere is, his whole story. She wants to be part of Clan Tremere, because within the pyramid, everything makes sense. Everything is ordered, everything is clear. So she becomes a Tremere, or she manages to become a Tremere. And then she learns the pyramid has been shattered, and she is now stuck in an eternity of disorder. And every single day or night, she is seething about the pyramid being shattered. And I like this coterie we have, right? Because Selzer is technically the leader, but only by circumstance, right? She's the leader only because she's neurodivergent and isn't bothered by shit that would bother other people. In other words, specifically because she is spurgy, she is the only one with a head level enough to keep everyone together. And on the screen is a narrative instance, or playing out a job narratively and benefiting from playing it out narratively, because Selzer loses it and stops acting like herself. She's trying to distract this manager so one of her coterie members can plant a microphone, and because they failed at some things earlier, the manager is pissed, and she insults Selzer in kind of a nasty way, and this shouldn't bother Selzer, but in this instance, it does. Instantly, she loses her cool. Like, the moment this little exchange begins, she loses her cool and calls the manager a dumb cunt. It's unexpected, it's uncomfortable, it's bad for everybody, it's bad for the job, and it's such a great character moment. Miss Computer loses her shit at the worst moment, and in the dumbest way over the dumbest things. Totally true to life. And it's a character moment made possible by rigorous systematization with narrative. Now, V5 has an aversion to dice, but I think dice are very important, especially when you're doing narrative, and there's a way to do it. So in Tourniquet, Tourniquet is genius, and I hate that the author's writing style drives me up the wall. The ideas are genius. is it Reverse Revelation, I think it's called. So in Reverse Revelation, you don't have an entire narrative or challenges planned out and then you deal with them part by part. Instead, the world forms around you by rolling the dice. One of his examples is you don't roll to see whether or not there are cameras you need to sneak by. You roll to try to sneak into a place, and if you fail, maybe there are cameras. Or if you get in, then there don't need to be any cameras because you got in. The world materializes around you. And when you're building a narrative, that sounds like it would be chaos, but it really isn't. As long as you are, once again, willing to go with it. The best moments I've had in Reverse Revelation have come from focusing, forcing myself not to re-roll anything, but going with exactly what it says, no matter how nonsensical, and then trying to figure out how and why what at first seems to be nonsense makes perfect sense. And so often it does become perfect sense. Even in longer narratives, it becomes perfect sense. It's crazy how it works. And we see this when we work with jobs. This is because jobs are smaller scale, and you can practice weaving what would seem to be incongruent elements together on a small scale. First set of job oracles, the criminal ones. Rolling 1 through 10 to figure out what type of job you'll be doing. And the challenges within these are not perfect, but for right now they're functional enough, as long as you're willing to weave them together and get more narrative and less system-y. On screen now are the sabotage challenges. Well, the target, the challenges, and the special requirements. You roll these however many times and put a job together. Now, the difficulty is we have only 10 challenges per type of job. I think we would need at least triple that to make them really good and not super repetitive. But again, right now, even though you have to work around stuff, these do function. And then we have the weather and population and other oracles, outdoors, indoors. And I want all of these to play a larger part, but for now they don't. They're more for flavor. But that's if you're going strictly in terms of systems, because if you're going even a little bit more narrative, all this stuff does work. But again, the difficulty is I don't want to be storytelling everyone or everything for everyone at all times. Well, I mean, I would have to be, but the more we can streamline it, the better. And I haven't worked out how to do that yet. But presently, in my own home, I am enjoying these oracles. And part of the reason I'm developing all this stuff is not just because I want to try another social media role-playing thing, but also because I wouldn't mind developing my own systems to use in the Black Massacre, which is the cosmic vagrancy evolution. Because it seems like people will write rules for their own solo tabletop RPGs pretty regularly. Looking around, there are a lot of them out there. It would not be outlandish for me to do something similar, and I'm enjoying the logistics of doing this shit. The big problem is trying to figure out how to get this to work in a social media setting, especially with the drop-in, drop-out. And then while we're here, I put together custom character sheets that allow for a little more customization, because those PDFs were driving me crazy, dude. And because I'm a numbers go up sort of person, I don't want hard limitations. I love infinite scaling. Not that anyone would scale infinitely. You would want to drop a character before you even get to that point, but I like having the option there. And for shits and giggles, if our discussions of this stuff have gotten you curious, I'll link in the description the 10-point character sheets, which are the ones with a little more leeway, and then the write-in health and willpower, which you do need to write in if you're going to be using one of those goddamn character sheets. And as for rules and whatnot, there are tons of places you can find them, and although you might not be able to find everything, you can find most of what you need. Just remember, we are on Vampire V5, V5 books, and if you're getting only one, the core rulebook V5 is the one. Also, considering everything we said at the beginning of the video, I know people don't feel bad about finding their digital media in other places, but with these people especially, just take what you need. Fuck them. And the last bright idea, which is on screen and I'm still working through, is the way I think weapons and firearms would work in our system. Because the way... It seems like not just the core rulebook, but again the community, a lot of people don't like combat, and frankly V5 doesn't like dice rolling very much, even though which is probably why they've made the rules so goddamn confusing, so people won't do it. But one of the things I loved about Cataclysm Dark Days Ahead is they measured damage from firearms mostly based on caliber, less based on weapon unless it's appropriate, like 5.56 out of a 20-inch barrel versus a 16-inch barrel. Then the actual gun matters, but in most instances, no, it comes from the caliber. And I like that system because it allows for players to come up with these sorts of guns they want. And those guns are balanced around the caliber, not the gun, so the player can use any gun they want that makes them happy on a role-playing level. Another thing to flesh out, perhaps. But this is what we've been working on. This is something I would like to figure out how to make work somehow. Because I am enjoying this, and Cosmic Vagrancy, despite everything, it was a good time. And I would like to do that more, if we can just figure out how to do it. And right now we are in the very early stages of putting together something much grander. But we will see what happens. In the coming weeks, if you manage to find a copy of the V5 core rulebook in the garbage or something, and you helped yourself to it, let me know what you think. And once again, if you want to learn how to play Vampire Solo once you have that rulebook, the Tourniquet PDF, it's Tourniquet V5, is $3 on drive-thru. Actually, you know what? I'll link his videos in the description too, because he's done a couple solo plays on YouTube. Really clever. Like if you enjoyed, subscribe if you haven't.